off your phones. Even if you think it is off, please switch it off. I'm going to call upon Professor Joe Beale, the Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University, to address us. Over to you, Joe.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome. And I'm very delighted to be able to welcome you and wish you well for Women's Month and to join us in our celebration and our reflection on National Women's Day. I'd particularly like to welcome the German Consul General, Mr. Hans Bussmann, and the British Consul General, Mr. Richard Wood. We have other distinguished guests who are joining us and who are with us, and thank you very much for coming. I'm very honoured actually to be able to invite you to join us in this stimulating public conversation. Public conversation on women's struggles, from the political to the personal, from the global to the local. The idea is for us to honour National Women's Day by giving each other food for thought, suggestions for action that can be taken to bring women and their positive influence to bear, both on our local and our national community, and indeed to the global level. Sharing the platform with me is former Deputy Health Minister, Mrs. Madlala Routledge, who now heads the Coalition Against Trafficking in Women, prize-winning author, Dr. Sindiwe Magona, and Professor Jennifer Fish from the Department of Women's Studies at Old Dominion University in Virginia in the US. We have, on my right then, the panel of elders. And on my left, we have the new generation. And Pumla has asked me not to go into long biographies, because all of you have a biography on your chairs, but to welcome the younger generation. And I look forward to what is going to be an intergenerational dialogue. And only someone with the intellect, grace, and charm of Pumla Gobodo-Madikizela could persuade me at this stage of my life to acknowledge that I'm at last an elder. But thank you for the opportunity. I hope that I have got to the stage where I have some wisdom. Professor Gobodo-Madikizela is of the psychology department, and she will moderate the discussion. So after you've heard from me, she will take over and get us all talking. The critical element of the event is that the conversation doesn't just take place on the platform, but that we're all involved in it, and that we hear from you as members of the Cape Town community. So please not only listen to us, but have your say. So to kick things off, I thought I would revisit, in the spirit of intergenerational dialogue, that I would revisit an article I wrote in my hot-headed youth that was published in 1989 in Feminist Review. I co-wrote this article with Shireen Hassan, who's now Professor of Political Studies at WITS, and Alison Todas, who's Professor of Planning. And I share it with you in part to reflect the concerns of women in South Africa at the time, in part to highlight some of the continuities with the concerns of women today, and in part to laugh at myself and demonstrate how old-fashioned some of the concepts now sound. So what we said is the debate around women's oppression in South Africa has become artificially and unnecessarily polarized between those who see the emancipation of women as being secondary to and contingent upon national liberation, and those who separate women's emancipation from broader political concerns. The tendency within national liberation movements to equate feminism with Western bourgeois feminism results in a dismissal of the insights that feminism can bring, and dismisses that feminism is relevant to third world women. So in arguing for a middle ground, we are asserting the importance of feminism, and particularly socialist feminism, as a political discourse and practice which has the potential to rescue women's struggles from being a bit on the side, and to making these struggles into struggles that can substantively alter the nature of national and class struggles, and so transform gender relations. So in looking at this, first of all, I don't know if we talk about oppression and emancipation and class struggle in quite the same way these days. We certainly don't talk about socialist feminism, and in fact some people are hesitant to even describe themselves as feminists. But I think some of the issues there that we were grappling with in 1989, the year that the Berlin Wall fell and the global scene changed irrevocably thereafter. Some of the issues are the same. We were concerned with the nationalist struggle, we were concerned with national liberation. And although that's not the case anymore, we're still concerned with some of the dilemmas that underpin that struggle in what were, I guess, the bad old days rather than the good old days. The issues of difference persist, so we like to think of ourselves as sisters under the skin, but in fact issues of race and ethnicity and inequality and poverty still persist, and still influence the way in which we do or do not organize. And what about women's struggles? Have we made ground since 1956, when women marched on Parliament saying, "Watita abafazi, watita Gobodo"? I'm not sure things have changed enough. Those women were saying, when you strike a woman, you have struck a rock. At a very similar time, Eleanor Roosevelt said, "You never understand, you never know how strong a woman is until you put her in hot water, and that is why a woman is like a tea bag." And in a way, they're two images that say the same thing, that women are fierce, they're fighters, they're resilient, they put up with a lot. Has the world made it easier for them? If we look internationally at the year we wrote that article, 1989, perestroika didn't reap its benefits for the women of the Soviet Union. They lost welfare benefits and gained access to consumption patterns of the West, but things have sometimes got worse for them. Many good things have happened since that time. We've seen a series of UN conferences starting in Mexico and leading up to the big one in Beijing in 1994, where what happened was a sea change. Women's issues were put on the agenda in a very big way. No country could afford not to address women's issues. Many countries had put in place women's ministries and so on. But at the same time, as we had all those advances, we also had the growth of what some people have called the femocrats, the feminist bureaucrats who spent their time having to put in place indicators to monitor gender relevance, women's inclusion, women's participation. And in a way, much of the struggle that women of our generation fought for got very bogged down in an international and national set of bureaucracies that took the sting out of the struggle and bureaucratized the process. Having said that, the 1990s were an important decade and a landmark decade in the international human rights movement, which saw many positive changes for women's rights and human rights more generally. Democratization was also a feature in many parts of the world, and this benefited women. And indeed South Africa showed the way for many countries with quotas for women in politics and in parliament, with its exemplary constitution, and through initiatives such as gender budgeting, now practiced in many countries. And yet the 1990s also brought with it a reinforcement and a deepening of neoliberalism, economic policies that led to privatization, that led to withdrawal of subsidies, that led to economic patterns that had devastating effects on many women, very many ordinary women who had to start paying for services, who had to carry the burden of some of the consumption squeezes on poor people. What we have is a global economic crisis that we are currently dealing with. A crisis that in many parts of the world has led to near panic, as major US and European banks and businesses have collapsed or posted huge losses. We've been fairly protected in South Africa from this, but as in many other parts of the world, we haven't been protected from high levels of unemployment, deficits and debt. And we don't seem to have an alternative to an economic system that got us in this mess. And yet, I'm not sure we are asking sufficiently where women are in this, if things would have happened in the same way if more women had been involved, how women are being supported with the fallout of the global economic crisis. We know from studies in the States that women were the ones who were most affected by the repossessions of homes as a result of being recipients of subprime mortgages. And we know in South Africa that women are working harder both inside and outside of the home to cope with the high levels of unemployment. So what all of this says to me, looking from the global to the local, is that crisis isn't new. We've had it in the 1930s, we've had the Asian crisis, we've had all sorts of economic crises. We've had our own ups and downs economically in South Africa, and women have always been there to fill the gap, to plug the holes. So there's the continuity. But yet we have a regulatory environment internationally, a constitution nationally, which leaves things very perfectly orchestrated for women. So there's a gap between our policies and our realities. I want to leave you with one further thought, and that is that violence against women was one of the things that united people, was an issue that united women in the past, and I think it unites women today. No matter what women's class positions, what women's racial groups, where they come from, where they're going, women all experience some forms of violence, and I think I would like to put that on the table as something of a talking point across the generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joe. Mark, where is Mark? Could you move this table a little bit? As Joe said, we are going to have a conversation tonight. And on my left, we have the younger generation, and on my right, the older generation. This evening is an intergenerational dialogue. Intergenerational both on the front stage as well as at the audience level. So please, when the time comes for the talking to happen, don't hold back. This is what is going to happen tonight. The people on my left, who are the younger generation, will each give a 5-minute presentation, 5-minute statement about what the themes of tonight mean for them. These are students from UCT, the three here, Lumi, Samantha, and Bumi. They're all students. They're involved in the study of this issue.